Hey folks, this is Wistful Deal here, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another Dementia music review album cover. I've been really anticipating to finally get this done and everything, and I'm finally glad that I'm mentally and psychologically okay now to where I feel that I can go ahead and cover this kind of serious topic here and everything. Now, I just want to say real fast before we, begin or jump any further. If you folks are seeing this again all of a sudden, a couple months later or whatever, a month or so later or whatnot, it's mainly because that I actually did do a video on this before. There's an album that I'm going to be covering and talking about, which you folks are gonna soon, soon here see and everything as I show you folks. But mainly, so I'm redoing this video here purely because the last time I did it, it was way too goddamn long. It was over 3 hours. And even though some of you folks were mainly okay with it and fine with it, I'm glad that most of you overall said to go ahead and redo it. Because 3 hours is pretty goddamn long, I'm not gonna lie. And it's not anything bad that I did in that said video or whatever. I just feel that the length was a bit too long and everything. So just think of this as a trimmed down, cut the fat version of it per se. Like a well trimmed meat, I suppose, or guess, or whatever. But anyway, so if you folks are seeing this again, that's mainly purely the reason why, is that this video is just trimmed down and things aren't so long. But anyway, folks, getting back on track, and with that answer out of the way, we got something extra special here today. If you folks haven't known, I've been doing these kinds of videos for a good minute now, where I cover fan projects that are based on Everywhere at the End of Time and Everywhere at the End of Time fan projects. And if you folks recall, I did do one like a couple years or so. It was like a year or two ago or whatever, where I covered a fan project that's one of my most favorite fan projects of the whole Caretaker fan community. And it's called All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years by Dante Timberwolf. If you folks are curious to check that out for yourself and everything, I'll have the link down in the description below. So if you folks want to check that out and take a look at it, you're more than free to. But just bear in mind that I was a bit different back then, and I wasn't really quite the same person that I am now. It's nothing disingenuous or harsh or whatever, but just keep in mind that I wasn't exactly mentally the same or whatever. And it was my first time around doing it, so I kind of fumbled quite a bit in that video here and there, I overall feel. But anyway, the main reason why I made that video all those years ago is because I felt that Dante did something kind of extra special, and I didn't really see anyone else make that video of it, of his fan project, so I figured to take matters into my own hands and to look at that and everything and showcase it to you all. Because it is generally one of my most favorite fan projects. But in this video here, folks, what we're going to be covering is something, like I said, truly extra special. Because not only is it another fan project, but it's also based on that specific fan project that is one of my most favorites. A definitive version of all the grand memories of all the lovely years, if you will, or redux or whatever. And I am beyond excited to show you folks and to express my feelings and to talk about it and showcase it with you all here. It's called Grandiose Recollections and Beautiful Years by the Archivists, I think is what it's called. I think, or Molten or Molten or whatever, something like that. And interestingly enough, about this fan project here, this is actually a group album here, a group project here. I'm not too entirely sure, whose parts do who or whatever. But anyway, this is a group project, interestingly enough, and I am very excited to go ahead and show you folks here with this and to take on this journey with you all here. But before we begin, and before we dive on into a fan project here and everything here, folks, a quick fair warning with this here, as you folks may have seen or whatever. Because in this video here, there's going to be some legitimately spooky stuff. Not just spooky stuff, but stuff that's genuinely real and very serious here. And if you folks haven't figured it out by now, this is based on dementia here and Alzheimer's here. And, you know, if you folks aren't in the best mental state, you know, in the head or whatever, or if you're having, you know, a tough time in your life, maybe skip this video here until another time when you're mentally okay or whatever. And the reason that I'm back at it again with this and doing this again is that I am glad to say that I think I'm at a point to where I am mentally okay and psychologically okay to not only be happy, but to be able to go ahead and cover this again. So with all that being said and out of the way, folks, let's get right into the project.
In the United States, everything is bright and balmy, but there are a few clots of heavy thunderstorm cloud around, which you'll see very soon. Otherwise, it's bright. So we're in for better weather.
Thank you, Weatherman. Very much so. Welcome to the project here, folks. Part 1, A and B. The Grandiose slowly start to draw to an end as plaque buildup begins. Confusion is almost non-existent. Drifting thoughts are mistaken as daydreams as fond recollections of years past flow through the mind. The patient is at peace, having lived a fulfilled life full of wonderful experiences. Welcome to part 1 here, folks, and in part 1, everything is as you would expect in these projects here as they always start out. Very blissful, you know, very nice and everything, with coherent music, with only a small little bit of hazy static in the background. You can probably hear it if you listen closely. Now, what I plan on doing and showcasing here to you folks here as we go through this project here is that if you folks have noticed, the creator here left a pinned comment with all of the descriptions of, you know, the different parts here in this. And this is how the project is mainly structured here with this, is that instead of stages like in All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years or Everywhere at the End of Time, or in some projects where it's set in years, or even set in visits like in The Grand Decline now, this one here is set in parts. And what I plan on doing here with this, not only referring to each of the different parts here in this as we go through, but I'm going to be highlighting each of the parts as we go through so that you folks can follow with me and that you're not completely lost as to what I'm reading and that we can all be on the same track here and everything. And also, what I also plan on doing is that if you look over here, you know, down here, how we're at A1 and then there's A's here, and each time the letter changes over, so like over here, here's B, and then we got C, and then D, and then so on. What I plan on doing is I plan on referring to these as sides for you all, so it's easier to, you know, kind of digest and to follow along with me here and everything. So we're in side A currently at the moment, and then we'll move on over to side B, and then C, and then so on throughout the project here of this, just so that it's a bit easier to follow and that you folks know that we're all at and everything here. And what's interesting about this project here and why I'm so stoked to showcase to you all here and everything is that it is a redux version of All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years. All of the songs here are the same samples from All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years, or at least most of them. And everything is structured just like in All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years, just enhanced basically per se. You know, everything's enhanced up and everything. And yeah, whatnot. So if you're familiar with all the grand memories of all the lovely years by Dante Timberwolf, you're gonna see a lot of similarities here with this project here. There's one more song that I want to showcase to you folks here, and truth be told, there's too much songs that I could showcase here, too many. All of these are great here and everything, but the last song that I want to showcase to you folks here is an A10 here, with Time Marches Forward. There's something about this last song here that I really like, and that's really nice. I honestly just can't get enough of this piano here. And before I forget, the last thing that I want to talk to you folks about on side A here is this cover here of this, which is a nice golden warm orange pot of plant. It could be flowers, I guess, but I'm gonna refer to it as a plant because that's what it kind of looks like to me. But anyway, nonetheless, it's a really nice shiny golden orange plant here with a nice structured vase and everything, with a very warm orange background. You know, it's very nice and everything, and I can just picture the patient mainly looking back on memories very fondly and everything, although the staticiness in the background is getting a bit eerie and everything. So with all that being said, folks, we are going to move on over to side B.
That's why I'm sitting here with you, because you remind me of you. Your eyes, your throat, your lips. Everything about you reminds me of you, except you. How do you account for that?
You tell me, dude. I have no idea, so you tell me. Later on, more recognizable indicators begin to show. They begin with forgetting to lock the door or neglecting a crucial part of your daily routine. These warning signs are ignored as the normality or whatever of old age and are invisible to both clinicians and family alike until these symptoms slowly begin to worsen. So, welcome to side B now, and what I just referred to with, side A here. We're in side B now, and this is what I'm kind of getting at here with the sides. And another thing to point out too as well is that each time we enter into a different side or different letter per se, the cover is going to change over to that side and everything. So now the cover has obviously changed over to an old record player, and you folks may see some indicators here with this, that this is actually just like in all the grand memories of all the lovely years of stage 1, there's also a record player in that. So this is kind of swapped over here, whereas instead of the golden, instead of the record player being the first thing you see when you start listening to the project, it's actually the pot of flowers, kind of referring over to stage 1 and all the grand memories, or potted plant, if you will, or whatever. So with side B here, it's basically the same as side A here, but the only difference is that the staticiness is a bit heavier, and there's an unnerving feeling of something being off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. A prime example of things being unsettling and kind of creepy-ish, if you will, if I can find it, I think is in B7 here with this, if I recall.
Remember?
Yep.
I'll always stand by you.
Don't overdo it. Good night.
Gotta keep my throat intact. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the song here makes me feel kind of nervous and uneasy. Everything's mainly fine, you can still hear coherently, but there's a big offness with this, you know. Something's clearly not right here with this, and it gives that feeling that something isn't right. Something's wrong here with this. Something's not clicking. And with the slow voices of this, and the weird echoey-ish effect or whatever, along with the staticiness in the background, gives a unnerving, uncanny feeling. It's like looking at an image that you know everything's fine, but the overall feeling you get is something off, despite everything being fine and everything. It's like an intimate feeling, if you will, with this. But the last thing I want to show with you folks in this part here is in the ending of this, with the last song, B10. We'll face the music together. So, the cover has obviously changed over. The colors are now very much darkened, everything's more red and everything, and the reason I want to showcase this song here is that it's the perfect uncanniness to, well, not only is something off, but it's the unnerving, settling feeling and horrifying reality of what's to come in the future as we continue along here with this. And this song here is just unnerving. There's a part that honestly just gives me chills with this. Not just with the distortion, but also with forgetfulness and things drifting away as we speak, or so if you will. I overall feel that this is the perfect send-off and uncanny feeling of leading over into part 2 here with this. You see, it's that part there of like drifting off, and you know, that part of drifting off only to sudden be awake. It's like being drowsy and you're falling asleep or something, only to suddenly, you know, wake up and everything. It's truly an uncanny ending and an unnerving send-off of something not only being off, but it's too eerie to not ignore. So, with all that said, folks, let's move on to part 2. Part 2. C and D. Unease sets in as the creeping realization that something is amiss enters the mind. The patient self-advocates and seeks doctors and clinicians, leading to a diagnosis of late-onset Alzheimer's disease. The entire world is shaken by this revolution, and the stress of such a fact leads to denial, attempts to neglect the symptoms, and a forceful push to remember. Welcome to part 2 here, folks, and inside C. And unlike in part 1, well, with sides A and B, well, everything was mainly fine and okay and great and everything, to an unsettling, unnerving feeling of something being off, the symptoms have built up, and they've built up to such a point to, well, now more unnerving questions have popped up. All the unnerving questions eventually lead to a horrifying answer that answer to which the patient not only wants to be in denial of and pushes away the truth, but pushes themselves even more so to remember the memories that they still have and everything, and to cling on to what they have left of the memory, not wanting to face the fact. But alas, eventually we all have to at some point once we get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. There's a track here right after this one that I'm going to showcase to you folks here, and there's a specific reason for this one here. You folks are going to see with this, with C2. Wait for it. You folks hear that? I don't know if you folks can hear it, but I can. I hope you can. I am. But anyway, if you listen closely, especially on this side here, or this side, whichever, it sounds like a phone ringing off in the distance. And I feel that this is the representation of, obviously, someone calling you, but I feel that this is the representation of family members calling in to check in on you, or, you know, friends calling you to see how you're doing and everything. Or it could even be the doctor or whatever, for which case. But anyway, the reason I choose this specific track to showcase here is that I feel that the patient here is in their own sorrowness and staring into their own reflection, staring at the mirror in the bathroom per se, unable to pick up the phone and answer because the symptoms have become such apparent within them now to where now they're asking themselves of what's going on. Things aren't the same as they used to be. I'm forgetting things. I'm misplacing everything. Things aren't clicking and making sense anymore. And they ask themselves the burning question that is the title of C2 here. What's wrong with me? Because maybe it's just you, perhaps. And as they stare into there's a phone ring there, but as they stare into the reflection and question themselves, looking over themselves, trying to understand what's going on here and everything, they can't pick up the phone because they're too busy staring into themselves and asking themselves the burning question, to which we may get an answer, but an answer that we may not like. The music is dimming down here and everything. I'm gonna go ahead and cut up on over just to speed time.
Nearly 7 years ago, I was in Moscow.
Oh, interesting.
We were not at war then. The sky was not even overcast. But the clouds of war were beginning to gather on the distant horizon. You could just discern them.
Righty. So just moving on over, I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, folks, so obviously the cover has changed over here now, and it's not so bright and colorful like it used to be here with this. Everything is all dimmed out and the colors are washed out and everything's more moody here now and more depressing here and everything. And the last thing that I'm going to say real quick with side C here with this is the cover here. I said it before in all the grand memories of all the lovely years, and I'm going to say it again here with this one here. Because what I said in all the grand memories because it's also a disc here, is that it was a representation of Matthew's mindset and whatnot, and how it was cracking and everything. This here, I feel similar with this. It could be the mind as a whole, or it could just be a memory of the mind per se, or whatever. But as you've looked over at this cover here, you know, folks, the disc is very washed out. There's lots of cracks or scrapes per se, you know, if you use a vinyl disc and everything on an old record player or CD or whatever, how there'll be like scratches all over, kind of like the rings of Saturn with the planet Saturn. I feel this here is representing the memory getting old, or the mindset getting old, and not being able to hold the same quality as they used to. I'm not too entirely sure what this other side here to the left is. I think it's honestly just a record stand or a nice display to make the vinyl disc or whatever stand out or whatever with this. So yeah, so anyway, we're gonna jump on over to side D here now. Side D now. Past a certain point, symptoms and memory loss begin to become impossible to ignore, forcing the patient to accept that their condition is real, present, and worsening. This leads to an extreme depressive slump, as memories slowly start to warp and relationships start to strain. So, with side D here now, this is basically the point to where the patient is not only depressed, but they eventually accept their condition. Not only that it's real, but what's gonna become of them, and that they're gonna forget and everything. It's a very depressing and daunting thing that the patient overall holds, and it's definitely a very sad thing. I'm not gonna lie, it's very sad. The cover here has changed over, obviously, to what looks to be some kind of, maybe a radio tower or microphone, one of the two perhaps. I feel that this might be an old TV station, a TV antenna or something, with this down here kind of looking like some kind of TV. This over here looks like a toolbox of some sort, or battery, with the handles there, and with some kind of microphone or whatever. This up here that's above and at the top of the cover here, I feel is the representation of the storm closing in. And the reason I say that is that as we go through this part here, this side here of side D, as you're gonna notice, the cover gets darker, and the clouds, in a sense per se, the storm clouds, start to close in. And as it closes in, things get darker. I'm gonna try not to talk with voices appearing here. But as, you know, the clouds come in and rain down on us per se, things get more and more depressing. But yeah, kind of definitely getting to me here. But anyway, and you also will notice that this box here, or whatever, is getting, you know, crippled up and everything. And the colors are all draining out and washing out here and everything. And I feel that, like I said, the storm's closing in, and whereas from before, back in Side C, with, you know, it being, I feel that overall, with, Side A, everything's sunny, with Side B, there's clouds in the way, okay, maybe a bit of storm. With Side C, now it's cloudy and everything, and there's storm clouds. But now, not only are we raining, but we're thundering. We're in thunder as well, in terms of a weather analogy. And horrifyingly enough, there's something that's coming. Something big. And it's pretty damn scary, folks. It's very unnerving here. So the last bit of this cover here, well, everything's, you know, broken. There's wires, as you can see, wires all over the place, cracking all over, a messy spider web entanglement, if you will. Everything's super dark and everything. And there's this thing up here. It's very eerie. You folks are going to see what this is here in a moment. So, with all that being said and out of the way, let's move on over to part 3 now. Welcome to part 3. Part 3, E and F. The third stage of the disease is marked by the last fragments of a truly lucid mind being stuffed out as a fog begins to descend upon the imagination. The mood is unstable, shaky, and rapidly changing. Plaque buildup continues, choking neurons and rendering them lifeless. The final coherent memories are the ones held most dear. The connections made and reminiscent upon so often that they have survived the decay. Neurons start to misfire as contagious, whatever, recall becomes difficult. Singular memories even less so. Welcome to part 3 here, folks, and welcome to Side E. Yeah, Side E here with this. There's 2 covers here with Side E here with this. And similar to what I said before, back in all the grand memories of all the lovely years with Stage 3, the disease has become such a parent now that it's a tornado storm in our heads, psychologically and mentally and everything. From whereas before, well, it was a storm back in part 2 and everything, in Side D here and everything. Now with Side E, the storm has become such a parent, per se, the disease, that it's a psychological mental tornado storm in our heads. Well, it's gonna pick up everything that we've held most dear in our mental place, per se, or household, and it's gonna fling everything around, throw them around, pick it up and throw it around and destroy everything that we've held most dear and the last reminiscence of what we cling on to as a person and all memories here and everything. It's a very daunting thing. Tornadoes are pretty freaking scary, if you ask me, by the way. And with this cover here, I feel this is the representation of the tornado storm, aka our disease here, our mental disease, being far off in the distance, coming towards us, towards the patient here. And the patient can only just stop and watch helplessly as the disease, dementia here per se, comes in at us psychologically and picks up everything and just destroys everything around us. If you look over here in this cover here, if you look to this right here, you can see a house by the looks of it with a chimney and roof. And then over here on this side, it looks like some forest trees and everything. And the tornadoes fall off, but it's coming towards us. And eventually, it comes right at us. And I feel this is what this cover here represents, is us being in the chaos of the storm. I can already just picture the heavy... You know, the heavy vibration and the eerie, horrifying thumping noise or whatever, the rhythm that comes within tornado storms and everything. And it's us fighting and battling against the storm, clinging on to whatever we hold most dear, or the things that we truly don't want to, let go and everything. But the wind is too strong and it's slipping away from our hands before we can either grab it or whatever we can grab, we cling on to tightly, mentally and psychologically, before the disease throws it away and destroys it into something else reminiscent of what it was before. There's a little part here that I want to show you folks here. I wasn't able to show you folks back in all the grand memories because it was very tricky to find and it was hard to pinpoint, but there's something here with E5 here with this. I want to showcase you folks here. This cutie little guy. Yeah, just that little guy there. And interestingly enough, like I said, something similar happens very much so with all the grand memories. Well, and we're going to go back here with this real quick. But as we look over at this here, this is the same plant, yeah, part of flowers or plant or whatever, all the way back in part 1, side A. But everything is darkened now. The plant looks like it's dying here, and we can see cracks here in the vase and missing pieces. And I feel that this is the representation of the patient looking back on a car per se or whatever and seeing it all rustied up and everything. It's like having a nice shiny red car or whatever, and you go over to look back on it only to represent this per se, where it's all rusted up and, damaged, all the glasses or all the windows are broken, the shiny color that I used to have is all rusted up, a formal shell of what it once was per se. And I feel that with that title though, nothing wrong at all, is a representation of the patient like saying everything's fine, everything's, okay and everything, when in reality it's really not. And that's a really short, track too. That was like, 10 seconds? 12 seconds or so? A very short track. Very much something similar happens with Stage 3 and all the grand memories, but like I said, I wasn't exactly able to pinpoint it and everything. But anyway, folks, eventually, as we fight off the disease, we are left with the aftermath. And I feel this is what side F here, side F here, I'm making sure I'm keeping track here, represents here with this, is the aftermath. And we're left with picking up the remaining pieces and the ambush of the tornado storm per se, and everything. And I feel I say this with the cover change here, with everything being mainly empty and hollow and everything. These sides here, which kind of look like crosses or whatever, I feel is a representation of the main structure of something that was once there, but is no longer there. And I say this because of the representation of walking into a house per se, after a flood or disaster, a natural disaster, and just picking up the little bits of shiny things or small bits of things that once were, a broken cup, a burned up, car wheel or something, the aftermath of the disaster per se and everything, all mentally and psychologically here and everything. This cover does change over, like if we go back over here, There's a more golden, warm-ish look towards it. And if you listen to the song here, interestingly enough, it's the very first song that we listened to all the way from the beginning. But now it's very fizzled up and hard to make out. Try to listen. So yeah, it legit sounds like a beyond broken record player. Oh, that was creepy. But yeah, how there's the little snippets of something though. Eventually the cover changes back to its eerie green, but eventually eventually it turns into this cold, eerie, cold bluish, blue purple here. And I feel this is the representation of the cold isolation and the loneliness that settles in. Not just loneliness, but like, true loneliness. That even if someone's there, not just feeling loneliness, but legitimately being there, even if someone is actually there with you or not, because you're sinking in like a black hole per se. You're helplessly getting sucked in, and there's nothing you can do about it per se. And as we can see, everything's darkened up and everything. I feel that this is the representation of the lights turning off per se, and things growing darker and darker, like a dying candle, a dying light per se. And eventually what shines through in the darkness is something that's truly horrifying, and something that I truly personally wish that even my worst enemies to never face. And it's a process that's very rough, very tough, and something that I wish no one goes through. And if you looked over in the past here, with this center here of like this street pole or light thing or whatever, wire connect, I don't know what they're called, but you may have seen them through countrysides or whatever, light poles or whatever that carry from town to town. Anyway, the wiring per se has been dropped down, representing the connections. And my point is that if you look over here in the past, it looks like a pathway leading here, and the pathway that we're about to enter into is not only not fun, but it's just devastating on all levels. It's a storm, or a place that I like to call, and many of us in the caretaker community call, the post-awareness. So with all that being said, let's move on over to part 4. Part 4. Yeah, part 4. Not the whole damn thing. Just that little bit. Part 4. GH&I. Here we enter a short-term gray area. This place is not exactly the anorexia or whatever that will soon overwhelm the patient, but it's not the clear recall and singular memories of past stages either. Their awareness drifts. 1 second they can recognize the face of someone they've known for decades. The next, every memory of that person escapes recall. Reality blurs and melts together as cognition becomes fluid and confused. Welcome to part 4 here, folks, inside G here. So, with part 4 here, And I did like a little teeny lie back in part 3, at the ending of part 3, because this isn't, I guess it kind of is, but this isn't really post-awareness per se, but with part 4 here, what's different about part 4 is that this is more of a transition to post-awareness per se, a bridge, if you will. Think of it as from part 3, from where we went into the world and everything that we've known around us and what we've known and learned all our lives, to post-awareness, the confusing and messy hell, inescapable hell that our mind is going to go through and suffer and will continue to suffer throughout this point. Part 4 here is the bridge between the two here. Think of it as, I guess think of it more as descending, if you will, and we're sinking in further and further down into the darkness, like on an elevator or something, or sinking into the ocean per se. We're descending down into the storm, so much so. And what post-awareness is, I don't have the best description or the best analogy of it, but at least what it is in terms of what I've listened to and what it is with like the Caretaker fandom with this weird Dementia music genre here and everything. At least to me, what post-awareness is, it's where the confusion and the plaque buildup has been building up so much in your head here that we lose our sense of reality completely. We lose our 5 senses, we lose time, we lose identity, and we're completely disoriented, and you do not know who you are, and you don't know where you are. And the only snippets of what we can get in terms of what we can understand is little fragmentations, bits and pieces, like picking up colorful shredded paper per se, you know, with each a different color or whatever, or a pot of boiling water, but each of the bubbles that come out and burst per se, come up and burst, quickly pop, or popcorn. Everything's like colorful in the sense, but it's hard to grasp. I spit there in my own mouth, but anyway, it's hard to grasp on the reality and what's going on here and everything, and you're completely disoriented to where you don't know what's going on around you, and it's where your past and your present intertwined and mix in with each other to such an extreme extent to where you don't know what's even what anymore. And this only gets aggressively worse, not just, you know, mentally and everything, but also psychologically. It aggressively gets more extreme and more worse as we continue along and descend further and further down. I don't know if that's the best to give, but that's the best that I can give, you know. That's what post-awareness in a nutshell is, basically. It's tormented hell of confusion and disorientation to where you lose sense of reality, and the only sense of reality that we can grapple onto is confusion and fragments of something. That's why, if you're listening to this as I'm talking here, things are weird and confusing, and things are gonna get very weird and very confusing. There's no going back now with this here now, folks. Truly. We're at a point of no return here now. So, one interesting thing that I want to point out here with side G here before moving on is in the third track, Years Gone By. Primarily because the cover changes over, and if you listen to it now, things aren't so confusing anymore. You know, we hear some kind of piano playing in the background. It's faded and hazy, but we can still pick up on what it is before burning away before us. And the cover now has changed over, and it's obviously a woman. We don't know what kind of woman exactly, but if you kind of look at it closely, it's like she's made of ash or something, especially at the edges. But it's clearly a woman with her hair nice and everything, and with a ballroom dress or Disney princess dress here and everything. But it looks like she's made of Play-Doh or ash or something. And if we look closely at the face, we can't exactly make out. There's not even a face, truth be told. And even though we know that this is a woman, I feel that the representation is similar towards other fan projects and Everywhere at the End of Time, Stage 4, with things being faceless. It's a representation of the lack of identity and losing the identity of what the person is. Well, we may understand and pick up on what a human is, what a person is, that whole separation of what made that person special, per se, has been lost. It's like one of my best friends, per se, or you watching this video here. I may just be someone, anyone, but you obviously know who I am if you watch my content. You know what my face looks like. That gives a sense of identity. That gives a sense of belonging, per se. So when we see something faceless, it's like losing a character, per se. We know it's a character, but the who, what, when, will, why, blah, 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 has been fizzled out with us here. And the cover now transfers over, I should say more so, back in, and back to what it was before. And the last thing I will say for this cover here is that it's obviously the woman of what we saw before, but it's obviously in shadow with a red light hanging up above, us and everything. But the darkness fills over with this woman here and everything. And I feel this is the representation of the disease taking over on not the person directly, but I guess that too, but more so the side characters in our story, per se, and the people in our lives and everything. We're losing our sense of relationships to such a point to where we can no longer differ between the people that have been woven into our lives and that has affected us as a person and that we love and care for from just a stranger, is all I'm really trying to say here with this. We're losing connections between what a person is and how that specific person may have affected us in a both good or bad way or whatever. But anyway, moving on over to side H here, and the start of side H is horrifying. You folks are going to see here.
It's dreadfully confusing.
Never mind, darling. I love you desperately. I knew it the first second I saw you.
No, you're skipping again.
Was it in the real world, or was it in a dream? Was it just a note in some eternal theme? Was it accidental or accurately planned? How could I hesitate, knowing that my fate led me by the hand? You were there. I saw you when the heart stopped beating. You were there. And
Get
in
ready.
the first enchanted meeting, life changed its tune. The stars, the moon came near to me. Dreams that I dreamed like magic seemed to be clear to me. Clear to me. Your eyes looked into
God, I hate it. Yeah. That's always fun to listen into. So, yeah. So, basically, with, this in mind here and everything, right, we could actually understand something and we could pick up on it. It's always so eerie to hear something clear and understand something for a brief moment, because technically, well, I guess supposedly so, but yeah, in the sense of where we're at mentally and psychologically, we're losing our sense of reality and we're becoming more and more confused of the world around us. And what I just showcased to you folks there, the beginning there and everything back there, was a clarity. And a clarity is exactly as it sounds. Basically, through a sudden brief, and this does happen with Alzheimer's patients and folks with the disease here, well, through suddenness of confusion, torment, and everything being tangled up to such an extreme here, I am spinning everywhere, to such a point here and everything, there'll be a sudden, unexplained brief of clarity, and it will certainly happen out of the blue for no explanation or reason. All of a sudden, like back in Everywhere at the End of Time with stage 5, in the beginning of that, around 3.5 minutes, that 3.5 minute mark or whatever, or in other fan projects. It's more popularized and stuff to have clarities and post-awareness stages where through a sudden brief out of nowhere there's a clarity that will appear and we can actually understand something or briefly understand something that makes sense to us humans, only for a brief small bit. They don't last very long, depressingly enough, but it's only for a small bit. It's like a light shining in the darkness all of a sudden, per se, like a flick of light shines on for a brief moment before dying out, per se, within the storm here and everything. And oh man, that's always rough to understand something, but to eerily hear in the background the confusion, like a fog storm just creeping in at us and coming in at us. It's horrible. Truly scary and horrible. And the audio distortion and everything, it's very rough. So with this cover here, obviously, it looks to be a mannequin. He's got something in his hand, or its hand per se. I'm not too exactly sure. To me, it looks like those music leaders or a music magician, and they have like a whole group of folks with different instruments or whatever, and he's like the guider per se. You folks know what I'm talking about? Well, it's like the guider, and they tell specifically what group to play what on what instruments, and this is the note here, here's how it goes. And they have like a book or whatever in front of them with musical cues, and he follows along with the song as he's guiding everyone else in front of him, what to play and how long to play and when and whatnot here. The cover changes over to this more dimmed version in H2. Well, the color washes out, very much similar back in part 2 with side C here and everything. Well, it's not so red, it's more pinkish per se, and shadowiness and everything. There is what I would call a temporary bliss state inside I, eye here. Well, things are more calmer and things are more blissful. I feel that this is the representation, and I don't know exactly if this happens with Alzheimer's patients or not, but as we listen here with this, things aren't necessarily so confusing, but they're not necessarily chaotic like they used to be. Things are more blissful. And the best way I can think of this, per se, is being on the ocean. The waves aren't crashing in, we're not rocking the boat all over the place in a thunderstorm, but things aren't clear sky either. The waves are calm and everything, but things are still stormy. It's not raining, we're not in tidal waves here, but we're not in clear blue sky either. We're just in a thick rain, per se, but it's not raining. We're in storm clouds, and the oceans are calm, but things aren't chaotic. That's what I can best describe here with this, because things aren't clear, but they're not chaotic either. And again, I don't know if this exactly happens with Alzheimer's patients. They're similar enough with in stage 4 and everywhere at the end of time, with a temporary bliss state where for like a sudden moment, all of a sudden everything's more calm and things are actually blissful, despite things still being confusing and everything. And as we can see here, things are still don't make sense, but things are colorful. As we look over here, it's like a colorful space in a sense. We got a woman here who, I guess that's a brush. I was going to say it's like a really long cigar stick or something that's very, feminine back in the early 19th century. It's like something I would see Mizzy May from Lackadaisy or whatever use. You know what I mean? A really long stick or whatever that they put over their mouth for a brief moment, and at the very tip there's like a smoke effect coming out or whatever. But I guess this is more of a little paintbrush, per se. And again, this woman here, per se, looks like she's made of clay, and things are colorful and everything. But then, eventually, the colors wash out here, and we get this brown-pink fog here now. And this is a representation, obviously, of things decaying before us and everything. It looks like now, if you look closely, the woman here is like melting away, per se. And it looks like there's a little tip here at this brush here now that goes over to the fingertips here, and the colors are washed out and more gray and everything. I think the darkness at this corner here gets a bit bigger or whatever, per se. And this over here, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it kind of looks like oil. But yeah, everything's mainly confusing and disorienting and everything and whatnot. So with all that being said and out of the way, folks, let's move on to Part 5. Part 5. J, K, L, and M. Here, we slip into a state of total delirium. Awareness of oneself and the outside world is rare, and obscured when present. Thick brain fog settles in and encompasses us, slowly destroying the mind, as recollections are fragmented rapidly, scattered about, and flowing together. The mind's broken state may occasionally give way to a decisive bliss, imblink or whatever, of wrong cognition. Welcome to Part 5, folks. Part 5 is, well, we'll fully in post-awareness. Very much similar to what I said before back in Part 4, how that was a bridge, a transition over to the new world. officially here with part 5 here now. We're officially in the new state, the new world, if you will, and the point of no return. Well, confusion is fully at its peak, and we as the patient have completely and utterly lost our mind and sanity, basically, if you will. Where things are so confusing and so scattered about that it's almost exhausting to even try to grip on any familiarity that we may have used to have or anything from the past before, because of how our brains basically functioning now at this point here. The art cover, the first art cover for this visit here, looks to be what appears to be a golden old horn here of some instrument, but it's super awkwardly shaped and everything if you look at it closely. Like this here to the right is very sharpened and everything. It looks like it shouldn't really connect anywhere, but yet it's still, you know, attached and everything. And it looks like it's all covered up here, or getting covered up by this real green and white husk plant-ish looking thing over here. Like it's like an overgrown plant per se, and its roots or whatever overgrowing on the shiny thing, and it's deteriorating it and everything. The instrument in of itself is very awkwardly shaped and obscure, basically. Like this over here is very sharp and down here and everything. You may also notice that down here there's two little handlebar things or clips that this object horn thing is sitting on here. I personally feel that these two little handle things here is a representation of the mind's last bit of clinging on to something familiar and everything. That's just my personal opinion. And the idea of them being so small and thin is the idea of them being very weak and everything. Like it's not going to be able to hold the structure for much longer and everything. Followed up with a background that looks like concrete to me, honestly. Like cement concrete or something. On top of it, or halfway through or whatever above it, looks like wet concrete. Kind of resemble with the storm and everything from what I said back in part 3 or whatever. And then below it, in the background, looks like normal concrete or something. That's just kind of my take on it with this first cover here. But interestingly enough, once we start getting into side K, not only does the cover change, but we also get another clarity. Now, I'm not too entirely sure what this second cover is, to be honest. It looks to me like it's some kind of, it looks like some kind of faucet or something, to be honest. Like, walking around in school and you see a water faucet or whatever. That's what this piece kind of looks like here. And this piece right here that's attached to this big, tube thing over here, I'm not too entirely sure. It kind of looks like those, I always called it the tip fingers. It's that little tip piece that you put a CD on or whatever, a vinyl CD on, and how there's that arm thing that will extend over to the CD, and it'll just gently, you know, touch the disc gently to get the music playing and everything. I'm not too entirely sure what those are called. I just called them the music touch or whatever, if you will, because it gently touches it as the disc is, you know, the vinyl's spinning around and stuff, and you hear that little dee-dee, you know, for the speakers, something like that. But anyway, nonetheless, and regardless, that's what it looks like to me. And from what my best guess is that this is, well, we have risen up from the surface, if you will. Like, like reaching the surface of an ocean per se, just to get a breath of fresh air, you know, filling the air for a small bit before sinking back in. Because it definitely sounds like we're very much sinking in here, folks, with the sounds here and everything. And plus with this pile here, this brown pile here, that's my best estimate here. But anyway, we have the third cover here of this, which is this cover right here. The patient can no longer live by themselves, needing a caregiver to help them with basic daily tasks. They may get abnormally frustrated at their failing mental state, prompting outbursts. These slowly regress and become more eternal as anguish worsens and furthers the rift between the real world and their mind. So basically, needless to say, I know I was kind of a bit off with that reading, but needless to say, the patient is needing a caregiver, obviously, because not only are things confusing, but it's getting to the point to where daily tasks that you and I do and everything is becoming very much difficult and hard for them, and things are very much confusing and everything. So, but anyway, with this cover here, it's completely abstract and everything. Nothing makes sense with this image. And this is the main theme here too with post-awareness, is that as we go further along, you may have noticed this as well back in the past and everything from before, you know, as we continue along, you know, with these Dementia albums here and everything. But the prop item always gets abstracted or weirdly confusing and stuff as a representation of the confusing music as well. So like with this here, you got like 2, or I guess 3, I see this little guy here, 3 record players or tires, car wheels, I guess. You got this weird tube thing here with a pointy stick thing. Looks like it's got its own teeth, like it's a worm or something. We got a vase here with a dead plant here that's abnormally long, like it should not even stay up, but yet it kind of is. And then this down here looks like a stack of papers, like a shit ton of papers just stacked on top, followed by this weird legging thing over here. It's kind of odd to say. But anyway, moving on over to side L here, which is very rough and everything. So back in side K, you know, here and everything, things were more mellow and calm and everything. But once we get back to side L here with this, the chaos ensues and it comes back even more so and everything. And I personally feel this is the bleeding effect, if you will, because of all the red that we have here and everything. You look over here, it looks like there's a face that looks like it's in pure anguish here. But eventually, later on during this track here, more red will show. And the face is now covered and there's more red here. Hence the bleeding effect, the psychological, mental bleeding and everything. Then we move on over to side M here, which I felt like instead of bleeding, this is more on drowning. And this is the representation of like the hand here. As you can see, it's the same hand, just reversed over now on the other side here. And I felt like while this over here is the chaos ensue, this is basically the drowning phase. Like the patient is reaching out, you know, like drowning in the ocean against the fiery pit here over here, as we just continue to descend even deeper and deeper into the post-awareness hell here. So with all that being said and out of the way, folks, let's move on over to part 6. Welcome to part 6. Part 6. N, O, and P. We continue to descend further into the night. The disease has taken such a toll on the patient that their condition to the outside world is almost entirely severed as life blends together and coherency of time worsens. The state of living can barely be considered human by this point, as mental tasks become increasingly difficult and drawn out. So welcome to part 6 here, folks, and part 6 is basically, well, it's as rough as it's gonna get in terms of audio here and everything. If you folks have watched these types of videos before here on the channel, you know where we're basically at right now. And for those of you who basically don't, think of it as in stage 5 and everywhere at the end of time, or in the Grand Decline with Visit 29. Basically, everything's so jaded and so harsh and raw and everything that it's near impossible to even, remain focused and everything, let alone have an understanding of even what's even what at this point here, because everything's so chaotic and harsh and it's so raw and everything. This is as rough as it's gonna get, is all I'm trying to say here. It's as rough this is as rough as it's gonna get, so buckle on down here. But anyway, the first cover for this here, I feel, is very rough. This top part up here legit looks like those super old filming tape themes back in like the early 1900s and stuff. Well, they'll have like those extension themes per se that they go on, the film disc or whatever, and how if that gets damaged or whatever, or leaked or whatever, how if it gets damaged, there'll be like bubbles that'll like suddenly appear and the camera will become all jaded and turn over per se. That's what that looks like here. I don't know what's exactly called that effect, but that's what it looks like here. And then over here you got like some smoke effect here, some super harsh roughness over here that looks very sharp and kind of poisonous and everything all over. And then down here you got like 3 sets of stairs, just to add to the chaos and confusion here and everything. The one thing that I don't like about part 6 here is that the covers, whenever a clarity pops up, you're going to probably see here with this here soon, but whenever a clarity pops up, the cover will light up to signify the clarity. And I'm personally not a fan of that, because I feel like it's always better just to have a clarity happen, but only purely through auto cue rather than have it highlighted in such a way like that. But I guess it's not too big of a deal. It's just a little nitpick of mine personally, because I mean, all the way back in part 4 where we were just at, it kind of did that anyway, so oh well on that. But one thing that's very interesting to me is in side O here with this. Well, obviously the cover's changed over. I'm going to talk about this cover here because there's something very interesting that I find with side O here. But firstly here, before I showcase you folks to that, this cover here. Now, if you folks recall back in All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years, stage 6, in that side O, or in O0 or whatever, basically isolation stage or whatever state, I said that cover, the second cover in stage 6, looks like a brain, and how as dementia gets worse and everything, and as things rot away, your brain shrinks down even more so as you get, more entangled or whatever, something like that, and as the disease, progresses per se. And now that I look back on that cover here and think on it, that looks more like a flower that's like dead. You know, that has that hollow white circle or whatever. That hollow 3D white circle. That's what it looked more like to me, now that I'm thinking on it. This cover over here, however, looks more like some kind of tree. Or a cauliflower in some sense. And yeah, as you can see, we have a clarity here, hence that's why this cover's changed and everything. But one thing that's very interesting is in this part particular right here. Trust me folks, it's super rough. And apparently this happened in all the Grand Memories as well, but I didn't showcase it either. Yeah, this is super damn rough. I mean, the rupture. It is just, it's unreal. And it's so raw. I mean, the cover for this. I mean, these guys, honestly, they look like Dementors from the Prisoner of Azkaban and the Harry Potter series, Wizarding World. They look like Dementors. And I'm gonna speak on this cover here before we fade back to the other cover here. But this here, this cover here is very haunting. Like, it's horrifying. And it's just ghostly, and it's just so eerie. And I'm assuming this is the band of the song that we can barely even recognize. You know, like we got the drum solo up front here. This one here with the piano. This other guy next to it with the guitar. You know, and I don't know, it's just a haunting image here. And the rupture was so damn raw too and everything. It's like, you know how when you take a shower and how if the water gets in your ear, how you have that like effect or whatever, that sound effect per se, I guess. Well, you know, you hear the water coming in your ear, but then if you let go or stop or whatever, there'll be like that drawing and then pop effect. Or if you get your ears cleaned through wax or whatever, through some, I don't know, some tool or whatever, if you go to the doctor. That's what that was legit like with the rupture. Like, rinsing water into your ears, you know, and how, you know, letting your ears pop again after the water gets drained out. It's like that, but a million times worse, and over and over and over again. Yeah, that's honestly just cruel. Imagine waking up from a real dream just to have it be vague like that and everything. Like, that's just so cruel. It truly is. And as you can see, we're, you know, back here with this cover here and everything. This cover does change a bunch of times throughout this track here. Like, we got pink effect here, red, pink. This one, a more fiery type. And a more haunting type here and everything. Which is just cruel. But anyway, we're gonna move on over to side P here with this. Yeah, side P here. Moments of calm can appear from the most unlikely places, and eventually the patient can no longer perform tasks, leading to round-the-clock care from multiple people. So yeah, so anyway, so this is now the ending here of part 6 here with this. And as we can see, we got a skull here. And I feel with this part here, it's the grind effect of every last bit of what we understand or what we know being harshly grinded out. Like, it's like as if we're alive per se, but yet like we're skeletons still alive somehow, and we can feel the grinding bone of the disease just grinding us all out with like a bone cutter or something, I think is what it's called, or a saw, a special tool that like surgeons or whatever use to, I don't know what it's called, but something that, you know, a surgeon or medical doctor or whatever that would use to grind out bones per se, or to reposition or this or that, you know, something like that. That's why I overall feel like with this here and with this cover here, with this skull here. But eventually, as the track continues on, eventually the skull will fade, disappear, and we're left with this cracked up, damaged background here. So with all that being said and out of the way, folks, let's move on over to part 7 now. Part 7. Q, R, S, T, and U. Beyond this point, nothing is left but an unchanging gray fog. As the ability to perceive the self ends, so does the ability to express it. Any time that isn't spent staring into nothingness is spent either asleep or numb. Nothing is felt, nothing is received. The concept of forgetfulness and aching no longer exists. Nothing outside of the last flickering neurons does. The mouth hangs, the lips droop. They say nothing and recognize nobody. This look develops into end-stage Alzheimer's and has been coined the dementia gaze. Or dementia face, if you will. Welcome to part 7, folks. And part 7 starts us off with a clarity, if you will, or I guess bliss, better yet, as I would more describe it here. And I say this because of the cover here, mainly, of what we first see within part 7. And interestingly enough, back in all the grand memories, from what I said before, with the disc being scattered about and everything, if you remember, the disc, it was all broken up into pieces, at least the first cover of it, and how it was scattered about and all around you and everything. And how I said the disc is a representation of Matthew's mind here and everything, the patient's mind in that album, Matthew. I feel strongly similar with this one here, but the only difference is that from where all the way back in part 1 here, where the scratched up disc and everything, I would say that was just a memory, whereas with this disc right here is the entire state of the patient's mind, the whole entire concept of their sanity, if you will. Like the observable universe, per se, if you will, to us. You know, everything that we've known, we've learned, we've understood, and everything. And I feel that this is like one of the last bits of clinging on to something here. Hence, that's why there's cracks all over, and we can see, you know, up here, the fog edge up here or whatever, and the light shining through right below it. But alas, eventually, nothing can last forever, as this cover changes over, and the disc, per se, that was once here, is rather scattered about into pieces. Or rather, the disc disappears, and only just the shadow of it, the footprints of it, remains, per se. That's what this looks like here, honestly, with this. Like with a tire trail, per se, or a footprint, shoe print. That's what this looks like here. Well, only the shadow of what that once was is what only remains, per se, I feel. Everything's darkened with this gray, eerie fog here and everything. And, truth be told, moving on over to side R here with this, but, to be frank and honest here with this, if you folks kind of haven't figured it out by now, but part 7 is basically where we enter into what I call the actual scary phase of this. Well, things are empty and things are hollow and very void and everything. Interestingly enough, and I keep forgetting to say this, but this is actually critical stage 7 through like dementia, diagnosis and Alzheimer's and stuff and everything. This is basically critical stage 7, if you will. And the reason that the emptiness, if you will, like think of if you will, at the end of time, stage 6, or in the Grand Decline, scenes 8 and 9, with visits 32 to 36, the reason the hollowness and everything is so damn scary to me, it's basically the idea of living without being alive, per se, being stuck in pure limbo and an empty void, not knowing what's going on or what's happening or whatever here. That's what mainly gets to me. It's not so much the storm and everything, like from part 5 and part 6, it's this part right here of not knowing the knowing, not knowing if you're alive or not knowing what's even what, and you just remain in your bed, per se, as days, weeks, months, or even years just tick on by, and you just have no idea even what's what anymore. That's what mainly gets me here. But anyway, this cover here that we got here is I think it could be all the way back from side B with part 1 with the record player. But as you look over here, there's little flake pieces that are like being, peeled off and away here and everything. Looking at this over here, it looks like there's a broken, the handle's broken off and everything, resembling that we can't really play music or whatever, or something, or rather that we can't really fix it or whatever as it's being peeled away. Like a tree in winter, per se, leaves blown away and fading off here and everything, per se. Disjointed, fragmented pieces of the dead self occasionally rise to the surface, sometimes perceived only by others and unrecognized by the self. These can be as grand as a short conversation or as simple as recognizing the time. A short action or calling for a loved one, only the closest and most crucial of memories survive to the end, and when that end is uncertain. So welcome over to side S here now, and with this cover here in side S here, this plant, or rather vase here I should say, looks very familiar because it's the exact same potted plant all the way back from part 1, side A, but it's clearly broken off here and everything. It legit looks like a fire happened in the house, per se, and after the aftermath and ashes, and after the fire died out, this is what's left and remains here and everything, per se. With the pot still somewhat intact and everything, but it's covered up in ash and everything. The pieces are on the floor, and the markings of the damage and smoke are on the walls as well, and everything. And you may have noticed as well that as we go through part 7 here with this, there's dates here in this here, And this is actually started back in part 6 here. I forgot to mention that. But back in the ending of part 6 with side P, if you look over here, how it's 1970. It's like how all these others, there's, you know, wording and stuff, titles. I know I never said any of them and before, whatever. But with this here, there's a set year in part in P1. If I'm going over here, there's dates here with this. And I generally find that interesting. And I feel this is a representation of losing track of titles here. So you're basically, the caregiver or whatever just has like set dates of markings of what's going on here and everything per se. But anyway, this cover here that we see here gives me a very bone-chilling cold feeling over here. This face over here, along with this hat or whatever here, looks like one of those Egyptian coffins or whatever, coffins from ancient Egypt here. This side over here along its neck or cheek, whatever per se, if you will, looks like some kind of train. This helps with the hat or whatever that this guy's wearing over here. And we also get a dead tree or bush over here that's obviously overgrown and way up over here and everything along the cold blue nights here. I get the feeling that with this one here, this cover here, is a representation of the patient just laying in bed day after day, week after week, month after month, or whatever. Like, they're just laying in bed endlessly as days and weeks just tick on by over here. You know, the face and hat here, or whatever, top hat, resemble the numbingness of how the patient feels and everything. The train is a representation of the mind still kicking in but not going anywhere, like with a hamster on a wheel per se, or someone running on a treadmill. Well, they're still intact and kicking in gear, but no actual movement is going on or anything. And this tree or bush over here, I feel, is a representation of the patient not only stuck in bed, but legit pinned in bed because they can't really do anything, even if they kind of wanted to, because of the state of mind here and everything. They're rooted into the bed per se. The bed has become the new pot per se of the plant in a sense, and they could move if they really wanted to, but they're at such a confused and at such a lost state with their mind and everything and any sense of clarity that they're basically pinned in per se, if you will, to the bed, and they're just waiting in emptiness day after day, week after week, month after month of anything, something. And plus, with this bluish thing going on over here, it gives me a very cold, chilling feeling. Like you're like a piece of meat being stuck in the freezer time after time. Then moving on over to side U here. Side U here, I feel, is, well, the emptiness is truly through on through over here with this. The cover over here in this one here gives me a sense of outer space, you know, legitimately, with these space clouds or whatever. Not the best or whatever, even though I freaking love astronomy and I always like astronomy and everything. This honestly looks like space to me with the stars here and everything. And I feel this is a representation of the patient practically mentally and psychologically being lost in space. Like an astronaut just spawns in out of nowhere from the deep depths of outer space. And any familiarity or any sense of clarity is like stars out in the night sky beyond the horizon, per se, and like staring up into the night sky, per se, and there's just nothing for miles upon miles around. I think we got clarity here or some shit. And with this weird static noise sound that we're listening to, I feel it's a representation of like the mind state or whatever. Holy crap, we do have a clarity, that's amazing. But anyway, folks, with all that being said and out of the way, I do not want to let this go. But alas, we always gotta move on. So with all that being said and out of the way, folks, let's move on to part 8, the last part. Part 8. V, W, X, Y, and Z. The phenomenon of terminal lucidity is not entirely understood, nor is it predictable. In the last few days of life, the mind can suddenly, for a lack of better term, open up. Neurons miraculously flicker to life, and the sufferer is able to recognize people and recall what few crucial memories remain that had no stimuli or whatever to trigger the recollection before. Anything that has rotten inside plaque-covered neurons can't be received, though temporarily recollections and formation of new memories is possible. Mood can vary immensely as the brain is very much dying, only fueled by a fading chemical supernova or whatever of DMT, also known as dimethyltryptamine, by the way, and adrenaline. People and places are able to be remembered, even if they no longer exist. Hallucinations are common. Awareness comes and goes. The mood and understanding is often that of an infant. Welcome to the last part here of this journey here, folks, with part 8 here. Now, I'm not too entirely sure where the last few letters honestly are here with this here, or sides, if you will, as I've been calling it throughout this journey here, you know, and everything, because all there is left with part 8 is just legit part 8, you know, that's it. So I'm not going to worry too much on what letter side we're on here now, because I can't even really keep track of it or showcase it, even if I kind of wanted to anyway. But anyway, so to break it down, what terminal lucidity is, and I think terminal lucidity is truly one of the most strange yet amazing things with the human condition of the brain and mind, genuinely, personally. Because, you know, technically, I'm not trying to be cruel here, whatever, but technically, scientifically, and everything that we understand so far as human beings, terminal lucidity is kind of a blissful freak accident, if you will, a good karma freak accident, because technically and scientifically, this shouldn't really happen, per se, you know, because everything what we've understand with our brains, right? Our memories are connected through neurons. Neurons pass on through to our senses and everything. Our brain's the main core of what we understand around us and what we, you know, get at and everything, and what we learn and what we grow and our understanding, you know, everything, the gist of it, right? So when our brain, like a disease with dementia and Alzheimer's, when it's suffocating here and everything, you know, something like terminal lucidity shouldn't really happen, but yet it does happen. Very rarely though, but yet it does happen. And regardless if you, as a personal person or whatever anyone may view it as, you know, whether it's through religion or karma or the universe, whatever the hell, it doesn't really matter in the sense if it's like the light of God or Jesus reaching down to you for the last final time, the universe giving you a final waking up per se or whatever, or even just the body kicking in per se, and it's such a strong push per se to stay alive that you just wake up for some freaky reason, per se, or are somewhat able to recognize things. Whatever the case may or may not be, regardless if you're religious or whatever the hell, right? Atheism, regardless whatever you may think or believe in, the point is that terminal lucidity is truly one of the things that I feel is generally the closest thing to the soul, if we have souls here. I'm not trying to get too personal here with this or whatever, but I personally believe that we, have souls here or whatever, and if we do have souls, if there is an afterlife, if there is a God, I'm just saying if here in quotations here, but nonetheless, regardless, if that was actual proof of it, genuinely and everything, I genuinely heart to heart feel that terminal lucidity is the closest thing to the proof of the soul, because it showcases that even in the depths of the Mariana Trench in one state of mind for Alzheimer's, to have a sudden brief moment of this clarity, if you will, or a sudden open up of rift, if you will, is something that, while we may not fully understand, nonetheless, it's truly one of the most fascinating and bizarre things of the human condition here. I personally feel on this here. I'm gonna cut on over for a bit. Okay, maybe not that, 'cause that was a bit loud though. But, so I want to talk real fast before we get to the ending here. I want to talk about two things that I feel like most folks in the Caretaker fan community, and I said this before, and I'm going to say it again here with this video here. I felt like terminal lucidity in the Caretaker fan community has been misunderstood for a good minute now. And those two main things are basically that when you get Alzheimer's or dementia, that you get terminal lucidity, and that when you get terminal lucidity, it's crystal water clear and everything, and you can understand things and read things and everything. That's not really the full case with it. In fact, as we listen to this here with this scenery here and everything, the way I see it is that it's like being born all over again, in the sense, through understanding. That's how I look at it, is being born all over again, in a sense, and our understanding is super limited, super restricted and limited. It's like a Game Plus, in a sense, I guess. New Game Plus, The only difference is that instead of keeping all the skills that you've held previously from the previous game, in a sense, only few random bits of whatever you carried through the previous save game is now in this new game. Gamer analogy, I'm a gamer, that's what I generally kind of feel with this, in a sense. So only fragmented bits of your past self, in a sense, like fragmented pieces come back up again, but that's like it, and everything that's been touched and destroyed is already destroyed per se, so it's not like you can wake up and everything's all back to normal. That's not the case with this here. And I felt like with awareness, and especially as we listen to this here, it's more based on like being that weird limbo state, like waking up from surgery and half understanding the world around you. That's why I can kind of feel like with this here, that only things half make sense, and you half grip on everything here. Very much similar to what we're listening here. It's hard to really make out what the scener's even singing about, but But yeah. And plus, it's super damn rare. Like, extremely rare. Like, only 5 or 10% at most, the folks that get Alzheimer's or dementia will get terminal lucidity. It's super rare, because 9 times out of 10, depressingly enough, we just fade in with the limbo of part 7, and that's just it. You know, there's nothing else really to it here, sadly. But anyway, I'm going to finally talk about the cover here now. And this cover's going to change here a bit. It changes at the ending here of this. But as we can see with this cover here, it's obviously, you know, a desk. There's a photograph here that's just 2 shadow folks. We don't fully know what these people are. And it looks like we have an object over here. Probably a pocket watch because of, you know, the door thing, whatever, over there. But anyway, nonetheless, let's finally reach the ending of this here, because this ending is truly grand. And there truly couldn't have been a better song to have this, generally.
Tomorrow, so they say, will be a lovely day. A bright new sun will suddenly break through. But I want to see tomorrow.
So as we can see, the cover's different now. I was right on this being a pocket watch. As we can see, there's a ring here, a wedding ring, and we can see the photograph here of this. And I feel like with this ending here, this is basically the patient going up to heaven. Not only that, but with the specific song that they don't want to go to heaven or the afterlife until they know that they're going to be there with them. Hence, tomorrow, as in the next day after they've rested and everything. They don't want to face death. They don't want to go to heaven unless they know their loved one is going to be with them tomorrow. And I feel like with this pocket watch here, whether it's through a gift or a manifestation of the time they held, the ring that they gave to their partner or and vice versa was given, and the person that they're most happy with, and they don't want to face tomorrow unless they know that they're going to be right there on the other side waiting for them. God, I love that song. YouTube, by the way, YouTube, you are free to copyright claim me with that song, but do not strike me with that. After playing that, do not strike me. You can claim me, but do not strike me. You folks want to know what that song is, you can Shazam it or look up the lyrics or whatever. So anyway, after that song plays, it's just nothing but ambient and everything. And then at the very tippy itty bitty end of this here, super small, is the credits. And I'm gonna let the credits play all the way through so that it can be showcased that everyone's been properly credited for and everything. This is a group album, as I said before, which is insane. Oh, heavily inspired by Leland Kirby's albums. Yep, James Leland Kirby. And Dante Timberwolf's All the Grand Memories. I really had a feeling on that with all the similarities and the freaking, similar tracks and shit. I personally had no freaking idea. This project was massive, and it couldn't have been finished if it weren't for the following people who collaborated. Freaking groups here. Skype's, da-da-da. You're legit just a code. Was an AI bot a part of this or something? I don't know. I'm trying to be a little lighthearted here, folks. But yeah, genuinely amazing. Fig Sigma. Oh shit, that's the Artifacts. The creator Grandiose. Shit, he was a part of this? They were? Damn. I did not know that. I did not notice that before. That's crazy. The creator of the one that did the Grandiose. Wow. That brings back a memory. But yeah, that's the ending of that album, folks. So now, let's wrap this up here, folks. Grandiose Recollections in Beautiful Years, folks, is probably my newest favorite album of the whole Caretaker fan community, because it's legit an enhanced version of All the Grand Memories of All the Lovely Years by Dante Timberwolf. And funny enough, the biggest main reason as to why I started this whole Dementia series, music review thing and everything, was mainly because of Dante Timberwolf, and I decided from that day, it was a couple of years back or so, to take matters into my own hands, because All the Grand Memories, ever since I first discovered that album, has been one of my probably my most favorite album of the whole Caretaker fan community. Not that I didn't like, any of the other things, previously before and everything. But I think there was something special with his work that he did that just clicked with me. And it still bums me out how here to this day how there's still not really much recollection or really much talk about all the grand memories of all the lovely years. I've seen some videos on Everywhere in the Beginning of Nowhere by the Cowbell, and there's some videos on Nowhere at the Millennium of Space, by the Caretakers. And now there's even, well, I guess two, if you count me in, besides Miss Widowmaker, of the Grand Declined by Fig Sigma and everything. That actually kind of shocked me to see Fig Sigma in the credits, not gonna lie. But anyway, getting back on track here, it really bummed me out how all the grand memories, and even kind of still, how there's not really much videos really talking about it and everything, because it's been generally, one of my most favorite albums of the whole Caretaker fandom and everything. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, and to do it myself and cover it myself. And interestingly enough, I thought about that video before, and I've been thinking for like about a year now to redo it, a redux version of that, and to redo it, to go over the album, to talk about, the covers in more detail a bit and everything, to actually read the descriptions, because I kind of half-assed it, or didn't really, fully, I wasn't able to really read it. I have a hard time reading out loud, per se, or I still do to an extent, but especially back then, because this is a year, like 2 or 3 years ago. It's been a minute basically and everything. And since it was my first time doing that and everything, that's why I decided to throw in a little snippet of Everywhere at the End of Time by the Caretaker, because I figured that that could be as like a planting seed per se, just so that that folks aren't completely lost when watching it, and that they could kind of get like a gripping idea, like a handheld per se, a attachment, if you will, to be like, oh, okay, if we have any time, yeah, yeah, I know that by James Lewin Kirby. Okay, I can see where this is going. That kind of idea to help get a better grip as to what I was actually showcasing and everything. And then I decided to eventually cover Everywhere at the End of Time and everything and whatnot. But anyway, nonetheless, I've been thinking on redoing that, and ever since I discovered this one right here, I knew that I had to actually cover it. So I decided, instead of redoing, all the grand memories of all the lovely years, I figured to have it be like with this instead. So think of this, if you will, as a redux version of that video that I made, 2 or 3 years ago, if you will. A definitive version of that, if you will. And if you folks are curious to check out my thoughts and everything on, all the grand memories of all the lovely years, and if you want, watch that video and everything, I'll have the link down in the description below. Like I said from the beginning of this video here, if you folks are curious to check that out and to watch it here and everything, feel free to check it out here and everything. One thing that I do want to bring up about Fig Sigma here and everything, and that was actually kind of interesting how how they popped up, honestly. I did 3 videos on the Grand Decline specifically because of how huge it was and how big it is and everything. So that's why I chopped it up into, three videos, a trilogy of the whole project, if you will, and everything, because it was just so big and huge and everything. There's one thing that I do think that is honestly very powerful, or at least I felt that was very powerful. It was during premiere, and I remembered I was walking home from work or whatever, right? And I was tuning in with everyone else, and honestly, I felt like that connection of a community, coming together. I know it sounds kind of weird and fucked and stuff, honestly, of a group of people to come in to listen to, music that's represented of critical stage 7 and Alzheimer's disease and late stage Alzheimer's and, stuff. I know that sounds weird as hell, kind of is. But there's one powerful moment that I felt, honestly, and that's the overall connection of knowing that we're all suffering this together, that we're all going through this together, because I was walking home, and as I was listening in to the ambient noise here and everything, eventually I got home and stuff, and I texted over saying, is this visit, are we still in visit 32? And someone's like, nah, we're in visit 33 and stuff, I just overall felt like it was a powerful connection, knowing that we're all in this together, and that we're all going on through this cold, harsh storm, even if in actual reality, and, even if someone in that state of Alzheimer's, may not really matter in a sense because they're so lost and deep and everything, that there's still caregivers and people that will still help them with their lives, even if they can't see it. We're still here with all understanding and helping them out with everything that we can here and everything. I just personally felt that it was honestly a very beautiful thing, with that, with, journeying, going on through with, listening in and knowing, not even looking or whatever, but just knowing that there's others listening along with me, and that, like we're all in our own isolated boat, but knowing that there's other boats around us, even if they're across the world or whatever. I just felt that that kind of human connection, was pretty damn powerful and everything. And The Grand Decline is truly an amazing album. And with Grandiose, Recollections, and Beautiful Years, is honestly another banger album. I really love specifically the ending of that song here and everything. And I generally like to do these kinds of videos here because I feel like it's a way of me giving back to this real community here, if you will. I'm kind of fascinated with this. And there's a specific reason as to why I take my time with these. And there's a specific reason as to why I like to, make sure I'm mentally okay and that I can, go through this here and everything. I generally like doing it. It's very different compared to James' music, even though, yeah, his music is dark and everything. I feel this is a bit more serious purely because of how it's meant to be listened to. Whereas with James' music, it's more of a casual side. I said it before and I'll say it again. This one here is more of not really an experimentation as it may have used to be back when, the Caretaker did Everywhere at the End of Time. But I think it's more like a simulator. More of not really a what if, but more of like a like a demo, if you will, per se, but very much serious here and everything. And I always take these videos here, very seriously because of the subject at hand here and everything. And I overall like doing these, but there's a reason why, I take my time with these, and there's a reason why I take so long before going back to each of these types of videos here again, because, again, it's a serious subject and whatnot. But anyway, overall, I am very glad that this project was fully able to get through here and everything, especially that it's a group project here too. 9 times out of 10, whenever I hear anything with a group album, not even a group album, but anything with some group, it just makes me quill or whatever, honestly, squint. Because 9 times out of 10, group albums don't really make it that way, and it's not just with fan albums either. There's been like a bunch of them here too with that, but also with like MLP horror AUs and stuff. I know that you folks are mainly come here for and everything, and whatnot on TikTok. There'll be moments where I wouldn't complete or look over an AU purely because not only am I a completionist, and everything, hence why I waited for the grand decline to be done before looking at it and everything, but also there'll be like parts in the AU where there'll be completely missing, like a missing chapter per se. There'll be like part 1 and 2, and then suddenly we'll jump cut to 5 or whatever, and I like to complete stories or complete content. I like to do content and look over things that are fully done. Not the ones that are partially done, not the ones that are baking in the oven in the sense, but the ones that are fully baked and done and ready to serve. Because I feel like that way is truly, the best way to go over content, in my personal opinion. And if anything's incomplete or in waiting or whatever, I simply like to wait until something's fully done before talking over it, going over it, or even just looking at it and making a video on it here and everything. Overall, generally, I am super happy that this album, that this project was able to get through, to get done here and everything, and I just truly couldn't have been any more happier, generally here and everything. But alas, folks, that's basically all I have to really say with this long video here and everything. I hope you folks overall enjoyed it. I know 2 hours is still long, but at least it's better than 3 hours, at least and everything. But yeah, overall, that's basically all I have to really say here. If you folks do, by some measure here, if you folks do want me to cover an album or whatever, specifically in the Caretaker fandom or whatever, feel free to tell me down in the comments below. It may take a while, like I said, it may take months or whatever, it may be possibly a year or so, because I'm kind of, very careful with these here and everything, and I don't like spamming. And I like to do these from time to time, every couple months or so. But if you happen to, if you folks want me to cover an album or something, feel free to tell me in the comments below, by all means. I'll be more than happy to cover that, whatever said project it is when the time comes around here and everything. And I'm generally, a big fan of this real dementia music genre here. I'm kind of fascinated with it. But I take my time with it, and I don't really, listen to it too much often or whatever. And I feel like it helps with the pre-awareness stuff, if you will, the more moments of clarity and everything. And I feel like it wouldn't be the same if it was just post-awareness per se. And I feel like specifically it's that transition from clarity to post-awareness to, emptiness and stuff is what makes it what I call dementia music, or Alzheimer's music, if you will, and everything. But yeah. But anyway, folks, that's all I have to really say for this video here and everything. So, with all that being said and out of the way, thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you folks don't miss out on a future video or post I make in the future, and that you can always be kept up to date. And lastly, if you have any requests or suggestions, even in videos like this, like I said before, even if you have a fan project or album that you want me to cover or something, feel free to tell me in the comments below. Even if it will take a couple months or whatever, I'll be, more than happy to look over it when I get around to it with the times and everything here. But yeah, that's all I have to basically say for now here, folks. I hope you all are doing well and doing okay and everything. And I will see you all sooner or later. Bye-bye, everyone.